education has left a lasting impact on the way students approach challenges and opportunities. And just to share you a little story here, last week, JP and I had a meeting about this webinar, and right after, I went to meet a student that I coach. And when she arrived, she was like really excited, and she wanted to talk to me about the challenge cards and the activities she did during the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, I started laughing. I was like, funny enough, 2 minutes ago, or like a few minutes ago, I was on the call with the founder of the challenge cards, and it was just a really nice testimony of the influence that challenge cards has on students. To continue, so through his consultancy work, JP Michel founded SparkPath, a pioneer career exploration company that sparks attention from prestigious platforms such as Forbes, TEDx, CBC, and BBC. His ability to bridge the gap between theory and practice has earned him recognition as a thought leader in the field. JP Michel's outstanding contribution to the field were acknowledged in 2022 when he was awarded to the title of Outstanding Career Leader by the Career Professional of Canada. JP is a forward thinker, a captivated speaker, as you'll all see today, a writer and a thought leader. And I didn't include that, but something else is JP and I did go to high school together. And if you're wondering, because we have a room of educators here, if JP was a good student, I can confirm that yes, he was, but I'm not sure what he would not sure what he would say about me. So we'll go quicker here and skip ahead. So JP, let's dive in some questions. So the first question we have for you today is, can you tell us about your role and your involvement in career education?
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Angus. Thanks, everybody, for having me here and for showing up. I think the best way to start about my role is as an author. I wrote a tool called the Challenge Cards, and very soon I'm releasing my first book called The World Needs You. It's a book for career advisors to think differently about how we prepare students for the future of work. And it's exciting to do this webinar because the very nice introduction that Jen gave me is missing a key ingredient, which is the folks in this room. The success of this idea, the challenge mindset, and the challenge cards that we'll be sharing with you today is really due to educators, teachers, counselors, advisors, all of these incredible, innovative, passionate adults that are helping change the career conversations that we're having with students. So, I don't know if you're seeing all the chat, Jen, but like people are very positive and encouraging in the chat today. And that feeling that I get from these folks is the same feeling that I've had over the last 6-7 years partnering with folks in education to update our tools, our language, and our approach. And that's on a, in a broad way how to answer your question about my role. Very specifically, I created my own company called SparkPath to put these tools out into the world, to put out these ideas into the world. And now I do coaching and training of educators, as well as I develop new tools for students. How did I do, Jen?
Good. Thanks for sharing.
Thumbs up.
Yes. Okay, next question. What are the top 3 essential pieces of knowledge that every student should have when selecting an educational program and career path in this age of AI?
Let's start with one, Jen, and I'll start with the story of a student. This is a student that everybody on this call has met. She has no idea what she wants to do about her future. Okay, she's 15, she's stressed out, she's anxious. She thinks she needs to pick one job forever. So it's not really her fault, by the way, because she's been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And to her, it sounded like she needed to pick one thing that she would do for the next 30, 40, or 50 years, right? And we know that that's not true, but it's not clear how we should explain that to her and what we should do differently. So the first piece of knowledge that we want her to acquire is you don't need to pick one job title for life. And I think it's important to have this knowledge and to replace it with better ideas. And if you don't mind, Jen, I'm going to change your question a little bit, because instead of just knowledge, I would rather equip this young person with a mindset. You might ask me, like, what's the difference between knowledge and mindset? Well, maybe with the idea of a mindset, it can be knowledge plus something else. Knowledge plus maybe attitudes. And an attitude is a deeper held belief about the world. So are you following me? So we're thinking, okay, this young woman, she needs help. She needs a different way to look at her future. We don't want to just give her knowledge or information. We want to give her a new mindset. So what kind of mindset might be useful? Well, we want her to have new attitudes. Like we want her to have hope about her future. That's a great attitude. Optimism. What about resilience in the face of needing to change and be adaptable? What about ownership? That'd be a great attitude to have. I own my future, my career. I have self-efficacy. I think I can impact my future. What about design thinking? That would be a great attitude to have. Like, I want to be experimental about my future. I don't need to pick one thing. I want to try stuff. So there's quite a few different attitudes that we can embed if we approach this from a mindset perspective. I'll finish off by telling you my favorite mindset, Jen. Instead of asking young people, what do you want to be when you grow up, and expecting them to list a job, I like to ask them, what problem do you want to solve? What challenge do you want to meet? What opportunity do you want to take advantage of? And the way that I do that is by showing them problems to solve. For example, do you want to end extreme poverty or increase sustainable energy? Would you rather work on the challenge of improving mental health or fostering respect and understanding in the world? This is a lot of fun because that student, remember that anxious student who had no idea what they want to do? She can play this game. She'll pick a challenge that she loves. And then when you let her choose, she'll tell you why. And then you'll hear about her motivation, her values, her strengths, her interests, her story, her family. You'll find out so many great things that will help her craft her aspirational identity in the future. And the last thing I would ask that young person to do is to work backwards from her challenge. If you want to end extreme poverty, which organizations in Canada are already doing that? Nonprofits, government, private sector, public sector. Working backwards again, who works there? What are their jobs? And then finally, what are they learning to do that? And one of the things that myBlueprint's great at doing is helping people map out their future, right? Here's a new way to do that. Why not take advantage of this challenge mindset to reverse engineer the process? And that will make all of these tools that myBlueprint highlight what people really want to do. So to me, that's the recommendation I would make. And it's especially relevant in this time of AI, Jen, because so many industries are changing. We can expect lots of disruptions in the workplace, and we could put aside this era of time where we did ask students to pick one thing forever.
Yeah, I'm curious to see from your experience, how do students feel when you kind of shift that approach, when you present those challenges and all these and brings kind of like that power back to them? How do they feel?
I'll tell you how I started doing it very unsuccessfully, Jen. Okay. I would show up with the same level of enthusiasm I have now in a classroom of teenagers, and I'd say, what's the problem you want to solve? And they had nothing to say. They had no answers, right? Too big, too open-ended. They've never thought about careers that way. So I changed it. I started playing a game. I call it the challenge face-off. I'd say, do you like this or do you like this? For a stressed out, anxious person, like the student I just described to you, that was very easy. That was very doable. Then, Jen, I started doing it where people stand up in their classrooms and they vote with their feet. Like they go to this side of the room if they want to work on reverse engineering the brain, or they go to this side of the room if they want to promote healthy living. Then they start debating. Then they start saying why. And that brings a ton of energy. So that was the student reaction I started getting. Energy, connection, reflection. Here's a story from University of Colorado in the US that I heard a couple of weeks ago. There's a career coach that used this with one of her students. And during their second appointment, the student said to her, "You're the person who knows me best on campus." What does that mean about this approach? Well, when she used this challenge mindset approach with her student and then listened to, why do you like this stuff? Who are you? Who do you want to become? It was one of the most personal, intimate conversations that students has ever had on her campus. That's why her career advisor became her trusted advisor. And isn't that the role that we want to take on as educators? I understand logistically, it's very hard to develop these types of relationships with all of your students. Scale is always an issue. but there are moments, right, where we want that transformational conversation. And what a compliment to that career advisor for the work that she did, that student felt like that was the person who knew them the best on campus. And I think that's a great reaction that we can all aspire to.
Definitely. And that's my sentiment when I met with this student and she came in and she showed me what she cared about, right? That tells you so much about a student, and it really brought forward a different type of conversation. And it really helped me as well guide her better. And I feel like using ChatGPT, for example, I was able to really dive in and like really guide her through the process, which brings me to the following question. So now that we understand an approach of like shifting the mindset, can you provide a brief overview of how ChatGPT can be used for career exploration, and what are the key advantages of using ChatGPT in the context of career exploration?
This is another area, Jen, where educators in my life and in my network led. So I started getting messages from people. Hey, have you tried this with ChatGPT? Hey, we're using the challenge cards plus ChatGPT in this way. And I was pretty blown away by their ideas. So I started integrating them, and I did a webinar on this topic, and I've been staying up to date with how the tools are used. Before we dive in too deep, when students use ChatGPT, they need to understand the tool, what it is, how it works. I know later on we're planning on talking about safe use and ethics. So we've got a couple of points on that that we'll come back to. But maybe let me dive right in terms of what I was hearing. You know, that young student who finds something that speaks to her, what she can do with ChatGPT to research challenges is faster and more powerful than what she used to be able to search using Google and LinkedIn. Let me explain. Let's say she picks the challenge of protecting biodiversity and landscape. What does that mean? What does that look like in practice? Well, traditionally, she would have had to Google, like, who does that? Who protects biodiversity and landscape? Which companies are working on this? And that can work, Jen, but it's long. In educators' experience, in my experience, it tends to be 5 or 10 times faster to ask that question in ChatGPT than it is in Google in terms of the quality of the answers that you get. I think most of us who have used ChatGPT already know that accuracy, 100% accuracy, is not the stage where the tool is at yet. So everything you research needs to be validated. But in terms of speed, it really trumps what people can do on Google so far. The other place I like sending people to research, like what companies are protecting biodiversity and who works there, is LinkedIn. But again, LinkedIn has its limitation in terms of the quality of the search, even in terms of what students have access to and permissions and age requirements, et cetera, versus some of that information can be acquired even faster using ChatGPT. So that's the first thing I'll say, Jen, that inspired me. Can I add a few more ideas that I've heard from educators, and then I want to find out what you think about them? Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, I think when ChatGPT burst onto the scene, we thought about using ChatGPT to write essays, because it just felt like such a provocative application of the tool, right? A student could write an essay instantly, very quickly. So we had big problems with, well, how will we mark that? What does that do for critical thinking? I don't want to talk about writing today. I want to talk about career exploration. I want to talk about research, reflection, and coaching. Research is the example I just told you, okay? So what you can do in ChatGPT is you can research what organizations are protecting biodiversity and landscape. And if your ChatGPT is connected to the internet, that allows you to find specific company names that are present to today. So I've used both the paid version that's connected to the internet. I think this week that might have changed. Maybe all ChatGPT has access directly to the internet. I'm not 100% sure. But I know that when I use the unpaid version, they would just look at companies prior to 2021 where their data had been built. So that still had value. So that's one, research. Second is reflection. I like to use the tool to think, to reflect on, if I wanted to be, what if I wanted to be a journalist? How could I contribute to protecting biodiversity and landscape? How do I help? What are the best parts of my job? What are the worst parts of my job? Jen, I'm not talking to a journalist. I'm talking to ChatGPT. but
Yeah.
I'm getting ideas of about what that might look like much faster than I would if I was Googling this. Are you following me?
Mhm.
Last one, I like to use ChatGPT as a coach, as my own coach. And I think that students can be taking advantage of this as well, and educators can play around with it. You could say, I'd like to be a journalist. Ask me 10 questions that would allow me to evaluate if this is a good fit for me. So instead of giving the prompt, Jen, of can you tell me if being a journalist would be a good fit for me? And then ChatGPT has to guess who you are and match that with characteristics of a journalist. That doesn't always work that well. When I ask ChatGPT, like, here's my goal, here's what I want to get to, ask me 10 questions to help me get there, it tends to give me much better results than if I just searched. And that's an example of a good prompt. What you put into ChatGPT could be called a prompt. People who are very good at prompts, they can be called prompt engineers. It's a job that exists temporarily right now that's very hot. But if you teach your students how to be good prompters, you're making the most out of ChatGPT now. That may be a very short-term thing though, Jen. Like, I know that in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, ChatGPT will be much better at suggesting prompts rather than you having to come up with your own prompts. But if you want to use it tomorrow morning with your students, putting in high quality prompts is a great way to make the most out of the tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And that's definitely been my experience as well using ChatGPT, is that you get better to really refine your own prompts. And that I'm looking forward to see how they're going to be suggesting the prompts. I think that's a really good, like, next level, because I found that was kind of the hardest thing to really master. And I'd be curious, so we do have here, JP, if you would like to share your screen and show the demonstration, is this a good time to do so?
Yeah, I thought about an example before the college where I'm using it to coach me. Okay, so it's not the same coaching prompt as an educator would use. It's not the same as a student, but I wanted you to see that I derive value myself to do that. So I got to give you the context. I got an email from a board. They said, okay, at our district, we want to use the challenge cards and the challenge mindset as part of our science classes. We're being thoughtful around strand A. What are the curriculum requirements? We want to make science meaningful for individual students. How can we do that? And we want your ideas, JP, on how to use design thinking to do that. I love these types of questions, Jen. I want to sit down with a coffee. I'm going to think about this for an hour. Unfortunately, I get a lot of these questions, and I don't always have the time to sit down for an hour for each one. So can I ask ChatGPT for a boost, for some ideas? Can it give me 50%, 80% of the way? So far, I've had some success doing that. So I'm going to share my screen, and can you let me know if you see what I'm sharing? Great. So let me just share a few prompts that I shared, and hopefully this inspires other people to use similar prompts. So apologies for the very vain first prompt here of searching my own name, the equivalent of Googling yourself, but I just wanted to check if ChatGPT recognized, my work. So I said, do you know the challenge mindset and challenge cards? They did. They summarized it, which is great. Then I said, okay, well, let's say I'm a teacher that wants to use design thinking in my science curriculum. How can I use the challenge cards to do that? So ChatGPT first introduced design thinking, which I'm familiar with. It had some cool first steps. And then they talked about how to use the challenge cards connected to that. And I thought that was useful, gave me a process, gave me some specific steps. My call with the board is tomorrow, so I'm going to look over this and see what's valuable, what's not. I love this idea of cross-curricular opportunities. Sometimes we think that career conversations need to happen only in the careers and civics class. They don't. Careers conversations can happen in every class. Here's one that surprised me, Jen. I wasn't planning on talking about assessment and documentation because it's not important to me in my life, but it's important for educators. So this is an example of ChatGPT thinking about something that my partners needed that I would have forgotten. Okay, so this is ChatGPT helping me perform better. Okay, so just a few more ideas about what I did next year. What will be the hardest part of learning this approach for a new educator? They gave me a list of challenges, and that was good. There's a few things that I hadn't thought about. And then I thought, well, what are some potential questions I can ask them? This is useful, Jen, but The only problem I found with these questions is that, well, then the educators need to answer these questions. I don't think I'm having a call tomorrow to ask them 18 questions. I think they're coming to the call tomorrow to hear answers. Okay. So I said, okay, great. I like these questions, but then answer all of these questions, please, with a recommendation and an open-ended prompt to empower educators to answer for themselves. One of my philosophies is that the educators I partner with, they know their students, their audience, their subject matter better than I. I'm going to make recommendations from a career perspective, from a labor market perspective, but they'll adapt that to their audience, their needs. So then that's what ChatGPT did. Okay, here's what I recommend for how you integrate the challenge cards into the curriculum. Here's an empowering question for how you can tailor that for you. Here's what I recommend to facilitate the design thinking process. Here's a question. Here's how to assess a recommendation. Here's a question. So you see the logic here. So my initial prompt maybe was not very strong, but by refining, I'm getting closer, and I feel like I'm more prepared for the meeting that I'm having tomorrow. Jen, is this similar to how you use ChatGPT, or is it different?
In terms of how I coach myself, definitely it's very similar. I would say recently I've been working a lot on using ChatGPT for feedback for lesson plans, in terms of I have a set of equity questions that I then put the lesson plan through ChatGPT and then go through it through the questions that I've crafted in terms of equity, and then they send feedback and recommendations. And I feel like that's been highly beneficial. I use it in it's always shifting the way I use it, but one thing that I found is it's been very different for me shifting for using it for myself to using it with a student. So when I was coaching this girl that I was mentioning about, that was interested in the challenge card, it was really interesting to coach her how to create the prompts and really explore different career options with ChatGPT. One thing I would love to share is just one moment here, is I'll just share prompts that we've also created. So let me know if you can, are you seeing currently career exploration ChatGPT prompts? Good. Okay. So those are questions that we've created to guide students. We've created a lesson plan recently on how you can use ChatGPT for career exploration. And if you look at a few of them, I think those are really good prompts for students. So tell me about the responsibility of a specific career. I think that can be really powerful, as students sometimes like the idea of a certain career, but then they learn a little bit more about the responsibility. And then they're like, oh, maybe that is not as good of a fit. So if we're looking at the second question, what educational path is needed to become a specific profession? So those are all great prompts that you can use with your students, and we will be sharing that lesson plan afterwards. As JP mentioned as well, I think for students to create their own prompts as well is something that's really powerful, and that's something that's going to be really helpful. So that would see how I would use it compared to how I would use it with students through predetermined prompts, or really with setting the stage for students.
I like that, Jen, and this is a great list. If you're sharing this with the group, that's a really fun takeaway. Can we do one example together of like a follow-up prompt?
Sure. Yes.
So this is where the power of individualizing the answers can be very, very powerful, because you have some introverted students, you have some extroverted students. You have students that love spending time with people, some that love spending time with things. If you follow up these prompts or set them up with, ask me 10 questions about me that will help me understand these responsibilities based on how they fit with me. And I know that myBlueprint also has some self-awareness tools, right? Some quizzes, some ideas. Maybe you could share the results of those tools, like your strengths and your weaknesses, some of your values, and then say like, well, this is a little bit about me. How do you think I fit? Or ask me 10 questions to help me determine how I fit based on these characteristics of me. And then the information about a job title, a company, an industry can become much more personalized and specific. What do you think about doing it that way?
Sure, we can definitely do it that way. Do you want me? I'll go in my ChatGPT. Can everybody see my ChatGPT now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I would love, actually, we'll do a follow-up question in terms of, I'm going to put the question here. Tell me about the responsibilities of a specific career, and then we can create a question, a follow-up question afterwards. So let me ask people that are here today, what could be the career that we'd be looking at? So anybody would like to mention a career in the chat? Forestry. Okay, let's pick the first one that I saw. So tell me about the responsibility of okay, and let's see. So lots of valuable information here. So that would really give students some great information. And as you see very quickly, if you've never seen ChatGPT in action before, definitely can blow you away. So tell me about the response of someone working in forestry. So here, let's craft together a good follow-up question. So after students would see this information, that would bring it back to them. So JP, what's the question that you mentioned earlier?
I'm extroverted. My strengths have to do with interpersonal skills and organization. Can you rank these jobs and areas in order of the best fit for me?
I always write please.
I like writing please. Somebody else told me about I just like to
everybody's
say
saying
thank
it's
you.
weird. Yes,
I like to say
okay.
thank you. I like to say
Okay.
thank you and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. So first, community outreach coordinator, forest resource manager, environmental educator. Okay, great. So definitely a lot of great information here. So I would love to bring it back to everybody that's here. Is there a prompt that you would like us to try? So if you can think of a student in your classroom or somebody we'd love to help, what could be a good prompt in a question, and we can do it live together?
While we wait for the answers, Jen, I'd like to say to you, like sometimes after your first prompt, I'll write, okay, rewrite these areas as challenges, problems, or opportunities. And that tends to generate like challenges that students might want to work on, helps them see the bigger picture beyond the jobs. So that would be one example.
Yes. And apologies, there's some people that do mention that you see my screen and some of you don't. So is everybody seeing ChatGPT?
I'm going to ask Angus first. Angus, you can
Yes,
see
okay,
it. Todd
great,
can
thank you.
see it.
Okay,
I'm so sorry, Amanda, if you can't
that's
see
okay.
it. Do you want to
Okay.
maybe, Amanda, toggle your screen, press the view button on the top right corner? That might help. Thanks, everybody who answered.
Okay, great, thank you. So, or we can use as well. So we'll see. Okay, let's see another question that we have, or if anybody in the chat wants to write one. Okay, let's ask this question here. What are the potential career advancement of growth opportunities? And let's see. And then we can come up with in education, in teaching. Let's say we have a lot of it. Okay. So great and fast information here. So different ways. That's a great question. Let's see. Okay, we have a question in the chat that I'll just ask here. So I'm a self-identified Indigenous person. How might my cultural background help in the forestry sector? So traditional ecological knowledge, connection to the land, community engagement and collaboration. Great. And great, what's really important as well here, and that's why we create as well the lesson plan, is students are living this experience, but making sure that it's not just something that, like anything, that you are giving the power away for somebody to tell you, be like, okay, that is the best fit for you. Really being able to build back that agency, using that information, taking time to set goals, to reflect, and to really see if it's a good fit. From my experience last week with my student, she's really, really passionate about psychology and music. And when we use ChatGPT to research, she looked at all of it and I could just see her light up. And I feel like that's what we need to teach students, is when you're reading that, what makes you really connected and excited. And she had never put those two together. It was about being a performance coach, and she never thought about it. And she's like, yes, that is exactly what I've been looking for. She always thought about music and psychology as music therapy, and that's not what she wanted to do. So that was so cool to see that aha moment live. And I was really excited to see that.
There's a couple of great prompts that came in. I just want to acknowledge, Irene, I love the direction you took the prompt. It just feels like when you look at this list that we've generated, it's just such a positive contribution mindset. Like, this person, look at everything you bring to the table. And I feel like that's a message that I often need to share with students. Like, you have a lot to bring to the table, and your prompt really set us up for that. I know you don't have time to do all these prompts, Jen, Maria, Kathy, and even Shannon's question. They're all great questions. I can answer Shannon's, by the way. I would say test it, Shannon. Like, when ChatGPT is not connected to the internet, sometimes it doesn't have access to the latest regional information. But when it is, then it was going to go look up, let's say you ask about Alberta or Winnipeg, specific city. If you ask about Vancouver, it can find data and information about that city. So I've been really impressed with how good it is. When it's not connected to the internet, that's where you have a chance to have more biases and skews in the answer. And it helps to be suspicious. Like, everything that Jen generated in her ChatGPT and I generated in mine, we're not looking at that as pure, hard truth and accuracy. It's a starting point for reflection. Everything needs to be validated. I've personally had experiences where, ChatGPT is giving me wrong information, and I've had to go and correct it. And I like to debate with it, to just say, hey, like, where did you get that information to go there? So I assume that you would need to do the same thing if you're looking for specific regional differences. You're welcome.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, let's continue with the questions, JP. So for you, how do you envision the school community strategically being able to leverage ChatGPT in the exploration of careers? And what is the underlying rationale for this approach? So I feel like we did touch a bit on that, but if there's anything else that you would like to add, that would be great.
Yeah, I can just share a quick story. There's a teacher here in biology in Ottawa that has been using the challenge mindset to start her class. So one dream of hers has always been to connect her curriculum with real world challenges. She wants to connect her curriculum with things that are happening outside of the classroom. And she's using the challenge cards to do that. Her pitch to her student is, I want you to pick 3 challenges from the challenge cards, 2 of them related to biology and 1 of them not related to biology. So they do the exercise, they pick 2 challenges related to biology, they explain how it's related to biology, and then they talk about the 3rd one. And they say, well, are you sure it's not related to biology? Like, let's say improve mental health. Yeah, it's not related to biology, that's psychology. And then you might say, well, are you sure? Like, understanding the human brain, that involves learning about cells, synapses, hormones, the way the brain works. So then the students might shift, like, oh, you know what? Like, I want to improve mental health, and I'm going to learn something in this biology class that's going to help me. So the reason that the teacher does this in the biology class is because she wants students to craft their own mission statements for the class. Okay, she wants the students to be so interested that they can create a "what's in it for me" statement just for that, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 biology class, so they can personalize it to them, so they can see, okay, well, I see what's coming in the curriculum. Here's how those different things will help me based on the challenges that I want to work on. So you're asking me about how the school community can use this. I think we all want career conversations to be happening in every class, right? Regardless of the subject matter. I think ChatGPT can help us do that by the research that we're doing and by making connections for us, so that it's not just that one teacher researching all the real world applications. She might do that a little bit, but she might ask her students to do that as well. and that speeds up the process of making those connections.
That's a really good answer. I would say that really resonates with me, because I find when we talk about career education, it is everyone's business. But what I found is when I was talking to science teacher, to math teacher, that not all subject teacher know what's happening in their field and what are the shifts, what are the companies and all the options. And I feel like ChatGPT can be such a great tool to provide that information. You see, if a teacher has a unit in geography and they see a student that is really excited about a certain part of what they're teaching, and the ability to go and make that research, be like, tell me jobs related to this and what are the issues that are related to it, and see if a student connects. I feel it really brings really valuable information, and that as educators we don't always have access to, and it's so much better than just simply using Google. It's very precise, and what's the best part of ChatGPT are the reflection questions that you can have and really dig deeper in that information. So thanks for sharing. So we'll go here. Now we're going to talk about the ethics behind it. So what do you believe are the crucial aspects of ethical considerations that must take into account when utilizing AI tools?
I think about three questions, Jen, for this. Number one, how does it work? Number two, how can I use it safely? Number three, how can I use it effectively? To me, this is a good framework for helping students understand what they're using, before they use it. So how does it work? You might ask them to search for that on Google or on ChatGPT. You might explain, think about a super smart robot that has read a lot of blogs, a lot of books, a lot of the internet that can help you synthesize answers to answer your questions. A robot that makes mistakes. I think it's important to emphasize that. How can I use it safely? That question is a great opportunity to enhance their digital literacy, to understand how to use the internet. So the ethics of how data is used, security, what information you should share, should not share. During this webinar, I told you to suggest that a student shares their personal information to get more personalized answers. Well, if they're going to do that, they should know what's involved. Like, who are they giving their data to, right? And maybe they want to read the privacy statements that that OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, has created, so that they know if they share their strengths and weaknesses, where does that information go? That's a conversation worth having. The data that's coming back, is it biased? Is it fair? How do we respect intellectual property? What's plagiarism look like in the ChatGPT context? How transparent is ChatGPT about how they get information, how their platform works, how the information will be used and not shared? How accurate is it? These are all relevant questions for how we can use this tool safely. And lastly, how can I use it effectively? Well, one way that a new user would use it would be to use it like Google. You ask a question, you expect an answer. I don't think that's the best way to use ChatGPT. I think a more advanced use would be to ask a question, improve your prompt, tweak your prompt, make it a conversation where you validate, criticize, push back, challenge, reject answers. And if you can explain that key difference to students at the beginning, I think you're setting them up for a much easier time of using the tool. Those are my ideas today, Jen, November 21st. I should tell you, my ideas should change tomorrow. ChatGPT is moving extremely quickly. Very recently, they changed their prompt platform, or their plugin platform, which was a technology that would enhance their search box. Now they're doing ChatGPT apps. That's very, very new the last week or two. They're making changes in their leadership, their partnership with Microsoft. It's very fluid, very exciting situation, but in order to use it, you need to stay up to date with what's going on. For that, I asked for help, Jen, because I think it's too much to take on my own. I like to follow thought leaders who care even more than I do about ethics and responsibility. So there are some folks that are very connected, very passionate about this. You can find them on your platform of choice. I don't know if you're using Twitter, X, or LinkedIn, or Instagram, or following blogs like Substack, but I would recommend following thought leaders who care about using ChatGPT in K-12, using ChatGPT safely, because they'll keep you up to date, because things are changing very, very quickly in this space.
That's so many great points. And I would add that I would also encourage my students to do the same and really get the information that they need as they're using it as well. Thanks for sharing. So now we're on our final question. So what do you believe are limitations of using ChatGPT for career exploration, and how could these limitations be lessened?
I think we've covered a lot of them already, Jen, so I don't want to repeat, it's not necessarily accurate, the ethics and the bias. I want to cover one, which is I'm going to put myself in the mind of that student I told you about that was very confused, okay? Mm-hmm. So here's a great possible ending for her. She works with one of the educators on this webinar who shows her ChatGPT. She explores a challenge she loves. She uses the prompts you sent her. She personalizes it. She gets all this great career info. And she says, I got it. I know what I want. I've got my answers. Let's go. There's a problem with that. My question to her is, did you acquire the truth about that career? Jen, there's a very big difference between what people write about their careers than the actual career. There's a very big difference between what the company says they do and what it feels like to work there. There's a very big difference between a commercial about how Apple is environmentally safe and their actual practices, right? And how do you get to the truth? Mm-hmm. You talk to people. So far, ChatGPT doesn't do that for you. It doesn't let you talk to a real person that can talk about what's behind the website, what it feels like to work there, the things that you can't say by writing online. So the core principle that so many folks know on this call, to do informational interviews, to do coffees with professionals, to reach out with real people working in these fields, it stays true. That approach is timeless until there's a new technological tool that allows us direct access to talk to these folks. Reaching out to your parents' networks, to your friends' networks, reaching out directly to these people to have conversations about what is it like to work in the forestry industry. Somebody asked here Kathleen asked, what are some of the challenges that women face in choosing careers in the trades? You can read some great blogs about that, but you can also talk to 3 women who have lived it to say what it's like. They might say, well, this obstacle is not really a big deal, or this obstacle is the one that they never tell you about. That we actually face. So that's one thing I would say that is a limit for ChatGPT, because it'll give you a lot of information, but there's another layer of information that's not accessible through books and through websites that you need to talk to real people to access.
I love that. That's such a good point. So when we think really of the limitations, I feel with students is that they find this tool and they find this is the answer. Right, this is what's going to help me, but basically this is just the beginning, right? Or this is just a place to start, and then you really need to go talk to people. I think about the student that I saw her light up when she saw about performance coach. It's like, okay, now that you've had that strong emotion about a potential career path, what's next? Let's go talk to people in that field. And that's what she's been doing. I'm really excited to see her journey continue as she's taking that next step. And I feel that's something that's really important to use or to know and to understand the limitations that students might not know of because they get so excited about the tool. So now let's invite some people if you would like, if Angus, if there's any question that came up, or if you have any questions for JP, you can just write in the chat.
While we wait, Jen, I've got some questions for the group. It's very interesting. On the same webinar, we have people who have tried ChatGPT a couple times, and then we had an 8% of the users that are maybe power users that have used it a lot. So I'm curious to see if the power users, are you using ChatGPT like we are, or are you using it differently? I bet you may have some ideas that might interest the group that we haven't shared yet, so please feel free to share. For the ones who haven't used ChatGPT much, is this what you thought it could do? Is this more? Is this less? We're interested in hearing from everyone here, so there's no a question or a comment that's going to be out of scope, I assume. Michael says it's similar and different, depends on the context. Fair enough. I've used it to provide a transcript of a video. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Michael, a transcript of a video. I've asked it to edit the transcript of a video, like listen to this video for me, give me the top 3 points, because I wanted to help to decide, like, am I going to watch this 15-minute video? Let me find out if it's what I was looking for first. So I did a version of that as well. Gene, have not seen this before, so this was great. Good. I'm glad it was useful. I hope you get to experiment and play with it tomorrow. Don, is using Microsoft Copilot the best free choice now for ChatGPT? I don't know, to be candid with you, Jen. I don't know if you know about.
I do not know.
I know ChatGPT has a free version. Last time I checked, unless that's changed recently. Microsoft Copilot, Google has a version of called Bard that's only available in the US right now. And there's a lot of alternatives that will be popping up over the next few years. Maureen, very helpful and informative so far. Thank you. Will that list of ChatGPT prompts be shared with us, Shannon? I am 99% sure. Victor, I had a student in careers class upload his resume to ChatGPT and asked it what part-time jobs would suit him. He did this on his own completely without telling him to, which was super cool.
Yes.
They've got, yeah, a great approach to go and experiment. I like that, Victor. I love learning from students, you know, tricks that I haven't thought about as well.
It's such a great tool for resume. And one thing to mention is that they did do this experiment that they ask ChatGPT to write resume, and then an HR evaluated both ChatGPT made resume and people that created their own resume. And just something to understand, back to the limitation, that the people that created their own cover letter and resume receive more calls than the people that use ChatGPT. So I do believe that is a great tool to make sure that there's matches with the career, the job description, but that in terms of putting the heart to it, that's not where I think ChatGPT can really shine through as much, but it's really great in terms of feedback.
Michael, can I ask for your case, what you did with that presentation? Like, how accurate was it? Like, how good was the first version? Did you have to iterate? Did it make some mistakes? You may have heard the language of hallucinations, which is a term that's been used to describe when ChatGPT makes mistakes. I'm curious to know how accurate it was. You said it was a good draft. Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. A good draft. That's great.
And there's a question here. Can you share tips about how to keep students safe on ChatGPT? Is it safe for students to upload their resumes?
It's a tough question to answer directly, Charlene. You'd have to look at, you know, the promise is that they're not sharing personal information, right? So you could answer yes, but you want to know what they're doing and where they're taking this with AI. I know I'm on my side, I like to err on the side of caution. So perhaps like one way of doing this more safely is to not to share your individual name, you know, when you're sharing your resume. You know, the resume sometimes has your address. Maybe you could exclude your address if you wanted to do that. Those would be my suggestions to get started.
Michael,
Yeah,
as well.
Kathy had a similar idea.
Great. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you everybody for those great questions and for discussions. You'll just in sake of time, just wanted to share with everybody that we do have something that's new and that's powered by AI, Degree Hub, that is in myBlueprint. We did share information recently about Degree Hub, but let me just give you a bit of information about it. So Degree Hub is, as I mentioned, an AI-powered tool for high schoolers. It helps find the perfect career university and programs based on students' unique skills and interests. So Degree Hub offers tailored recommendations by blending myBlueprint data with AI tech using insight from 10,000 recent Canadian graduates. So students can find it if they go on their student account, under post-secondary, and then they see here that they can start this survey. And we also have, in terms of new arrival, we have this new lesson plan that is for career exploration using ChatGPT. That is where all the prompts that I shared earlier are. And we also have presentation slides that go over conversation with students in terms of the ethics behind using ChatGPT. And that also encourages them to be creating prompts themselves. And finally, we would love to hear your feedback. And JP generously said that you could or donated a chance to win a Spark Path challenge card deck. So just by participating in this survey, and just there is a question if you're interested in winning a Spark Path challenge cards deck. So if you just complete this survey, that would be great. We really appreciate your feedback and always look to improve. So we really value you taking the time, not only of being here, but going that extra mile and giving us that feedback. And finally, I would like to take the time to sincerely thank our guest speaker, JP. Thank you so much for spending the last hour with us, for sharing your expertise, for all of these insights. It was really valuable. If you don't already follow JP on LinkedIn, I would invite you to do so. Always what he's writing is very insightful. He's definitely a thought leader in this field. And if you're interested in learning more about SparkPath, we will be sharing some information as well in our follow-up email. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, JP. And we wish you a great evening and great exploration as you continue to explore ChatGPT. Anything you would like to add, JP?
Big thank you, Jen and Angus, for setting us up. And I got to meet, sure, a lot of new folks through this call, got to see some familiar names. And thanks to everybody who's been experimenting with these ideas. And together we're transforming how we prepare people for the future of work. And it's very exciting because our students need this work. So huge thank you to everybody for the time you invested today.
Thank you.